You ever watch a man cry not because he lost a person, but because he lost his pride? I didn't shed a tear at my father's funeral. I didn't break when the bank almost took this ranch back in '09. But the morning I found my 3 best bulls, horns hacked off, bleeding into the dirt, I swear, something inside me cracked wide open. Not just anger, not just grief. It was something deeper, something primal. And the worst part? It wasn't a random act of vandalism. It wasn't some drunk kids pulling a stupid prank. It was my own neighbors, my HOA leaders. The same people who waved at me every Sunday morning, smiling like snakes. They called it community intervention. I called it what it was, war. And if they thought they could get away with it just because they hid behind clipboards and fake rules, they were about to find out what happens when you mess with a man's land, his name, and his bloodline. Because out here, land isn't just something you own. It's something you become. So buckle up, neighbor. This ain't just a story about bulls and bylaws. This is what happens when respect runs dry and a rancher's patience runs out. If you've ever fought for something bigger than yourself, something that mattered when nobody else understood, hit that like button, drop your story in the comments, and subscribe. You're going to want to stick around for this one. Because this is how you fight back when they think you're already beaten. The morning that smelled like regret. How it all began. Do you ever have a morning so bad that even the sunrise seems like it's judging you? That was me. Standing barefoot in the dirt, coffee cup slipping from my fingers. And the smell. The smell hit first. Not fresh earth, not hay. No, it was sharp, bitter, and so wrong it twisted my gut before I even understood why. It smelled like regret. I staggered toward the bullpen, still half asleep, and what I saw made my knees damn near buckle. Titus, Hannibal, Mr. Bovine, my 3 prize bulls, the pride of the ranch, the heart of every rodeo dream I'd ever had, pacing the enclosure with wild, panicked eyes. And worse, their horns gone, not broken, hacked off, blood glistening in the morning sun like someone had butchered a part of my soul and left it twitching in the dirt. For a long second I just stood there, heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my teeth. And then the rage came. Not a scream, not fists flying. No, the real kind of rage. The kind that makes you so cold inside you could shatter. Someone had done this. Someone had crossed the line you don't ever cross with a rancher. You don't touch a man's cattle. You don't mess with the living legacy he's built, post hole by post hole. And sure as hell, you don't hurt what he loves and expect to walk away smiling. I didn't know who it was yet. But standing there, smelling blood and betrayal on the breeze, I made a silent promise. Whoever did this, they weren't just gonna pay, they were gonna remember. Every single day. Courtroom chaos, justice served, but the war just started. If you've never seen a judge look like she wants to throw her own gavel through the ceiling, you've never watched Judge Vargas deal with HOA drama. By the time I rolled into court, jeans still stained with bull blood, boots tracking a little bit of Granger County dust onto the tile floors, the place was already buzzing. Everyone in town had come for the show. On one side, me, Wrangler worn, coffee deprived and carrying a thumb drive loaded with enough trail cam footage to fry Karen Butterfield's HOA empire twice over. On the other side, Karen in her pastel blazer, clipboard clutched like a Bible, flanked by Randy and Kendra Phelps, her loyal if profoundly stupid henchmen. Randy looked like he'd already lost a fight with a fence post, which, to be fair, he kinda had. Kendra had brought her emotional support ferret because apparently felonies are less stressful when you're holding a rodent. Judge Vargas didn't waste time. She watched the footage, the sneaking, the sawing, the bulls kicking, Randy nearly getting brained by a very angry Titus, all without blinking. When it ended, she leaned back, steepled her fingers, and just looked at Karen. "Ma'am," she said, voice low and dangerous, For what you and your friends did, I'm sentencing them to 5 years of community service at his ranch, under his supervision. You could feel the air suck out of the room like someone punched a hole in a tire. Karen gasped so hard her Botox twitched. Randy looked like he was calculating how many cow pies that added up to. Kendra's ferret fainted. I'm not kidding, just flopped over like it gave up on life. And me? For the first time in weeks, I smiled. Big. It's like the kind of smile that says, "You brought this on yourself, cupcake." Karen sputtered, waving papers in the air. She threatened to sue the judge. She threatened to sue the state. She threatened to sue me personally for emotional distress caused by unfair cow proximity. Judge Vargas banged the gavel so hard it rattled the windows. "Next outburst," she said, "and you'll be mucking stalls before this hearing's over." And that was that. The court was adjourned. The sentence was official, and Karen Butterfield had just signed herself and her minions up for 5 years of rural reckoning. Only thing was, I knew better than to think it was truly over. Karen wasn't the type to take her beating and limp home. No, ma'am. She was the type to sharpen her clipboard into a shiv and come back swinging. Sweat, shovels, and silent lessons, breaking the suburban spirit. Do you ever watch a suburbanite meet real work for the first time? It's kind of like watching a cat get hit with a sprinkler, a lot of flailing, disbelief, and angry squawking. The first morning of community service was blessedly hot, the kind of heat that bakes the earth until even the rattlesnakes look for shade. Perfect. I met them at the gate, Randy in cargo shorts and Crocs, Kendra with a monogrammed water bottle bigger than her head, and Karen, well, Karen was dressed like she thought she was going to a ranch-themed Pinterest party. Designer boots, pressed flannel, manicured nails flashing like hazard lights. "Welcome," I said, tipping my hat. "Today's lesson is called Why You Don't Mutilate a Rancher's Bulls. First task? Manure duty. 80 pounds a day per bull. No shortcuts. No wheelbarrow motors, just old-fashioned sweat, shovels, and suffering." Randy gagged so hard his sunglasses fogged up. Kendra kept shrieking every time a fly landed within 6 feet of her. And Karen? Karen refused to touch the shovel at all. She stood there, arms crossed, barking orders like she was running a Fortune 500 barn. I handed her a wheelbarrow anyway. "You're on transport duty," I said. "Management experience required." She looked like she wanted to stab me with her clipboard. I grinned wider and handed her a rusty pair of gloves. By noon, Randy had managed to step in a fresh cow patty twice. Kendra had dropped her water bottle into the muck, and Karen was actively Googling labor laws rural America on her phone. But here's the thing. Out here, the land doesn't care how many zeros are in your bank account. The bulls don't care how many social media followers you have. And the sun definitely doesn't care about your HOA credentials. The land humbles you, or it breaks you. And by the end of that first week, the cracks were showing. Randy had sunburned so bad he looked like a lobster that lost a bar fight. Kendra started journaling her trauma in glitter pens. Karen filed a formal grievance with me, hand-delivered on pink stationery, claiming emotional distress due to aggressive cow glares. I framed it and hung it in the barn. Not because it mattered legally, but because every time I saw it, I remembered. This wasn't about punishment. It was about lessons. Lessons you don't learn in boardrooms or subdivisions. Lessons that only sweat, failure, and honest work can teach. And trust me, by the time part 4, From Lawsuits to Loyalty, How a Bull Changed Everything, rolls around, you'll see just how deep those lessons cut. Behind the pastel smile, the secrets Karen couldn't bury. By week 2, the pastel started to crack. Karen still showed up every morning, clipboard in hand, lip gloss immaculate, trying her best to look like the queen of cow country. But it was getting harder to hide. You can fake a lot of things on a ranch. Interest, enthusiasm, even a basic understanding of what a shovel is. But you can't fake resilience. And you sure can't fake your past. I first noticed it one early morning when I caught her sitting by the old fence line, just staring. Not at her phone. Not at the productivity schedule she had laminated in her truck. Just at the land. Like it was whispering something only she could hear. Later that day, Gloria, who had been helping me keep an eye on the walking soap opera, found a dusty file tucked away in the barn office. Labeled in shaky cursive, Butterfield Lease Agreement, 15 years ago. Inside, a mess of zoning maps, legal loopholes, and a name I hadn't seen in years. Karen Butterfield. Turns out, long before she was HOA royalty, Karen had owned part of this ranch. Not the house, not the fields, but a skinny wedge of land along the creek, land she lost when her ex-husband sold it back to the city in a shady land swap deal. It wasn't about the bulls. They're a bull in London. It wasn't about property values. It was about this intro, regret, and the one piece of dirt she could never quite put her name back on. That night, as I stood under the stars with a beer in one hand and a mind full of questions, it hit me. Karen hadn't just trespassed onto my land. She had trespassed into her own past. And the funny thing about trying to bear regret? It has a nasty habit of clawing its way back to the surface, especially in a place where the soil remembers everything. And if you think that revelation changed how I handled her, wait until you see what happened in Part 5, The Ranch Games. When pride meets mud, the Ranch Olympics, exposing pride and planting seeds of change. You ever seen a grown woman in designer boots try to lasso a goat? Because let me tell you, if you haven't truly lived. That's how the first annual Ranch Olympics started, with Karen Butterfield, former HOA tyrant, chasing a goat named Biscuit across the lower pasture, clipboard flapping against her hip like a white flag. Turned out to be the case at all. It was Gloria's idea naturally. "We need to break them," she said, handing me a battered cowboy hat and a mischievous grin. "Not with work. With humility." So we set it up. Hay bale stacking, calf tagging, relays, barrel racing on foot, and of course, goat lassoing. I invited half the county. Folks who remembered what Karen was like at her peak, before the manure shovels and the long, dusty afternoons. People showed up with lawn chairs, coolers, and an appetite for justice served cold, preferably with a side of sunburn and sore muscles. Karen showed up too. Of course she did. Wearing what looked suspiciously like tactical yoga gear and a hydration backpack the size of a toddler. Randy and Kendra, bless their clueless hearts, arrived ready for battle. Randy with a makeshift Team HOA bandana tied around his forehead like Rambo's suburban cousin, and Kendra in neon leggings that could probably be seen from space. We kicked things off with hay bale stacking. Now, hay bales aren't particularly heavy if you know how to lift with your legs. Karen, predictably, did not. She lasted 3 stacks before tipping over backward into a pile of dusty straw like a turtle stuck on its shell. The crowd cheered, not because they hated her, but because they saw something rare. A woman so used to winning by paperwork and pressure, losing to a bale of grass. Then came the calf tag. Watching Randy sprint after a calf was like watching a drunk uncle try to catch a greased watermelon at a 4th of July barbecue. By the time he finally tagged the calf, he was panting so hard a nearby goat started bleeding in sympathy. Kendra actually wasn't half bad. She treated it like a TikTok challenge and somehow managed to TikTok her way into roping a calf. Fair play to her. But the real highlight? The goat lasso. Karen squared up like she was storming the beaches of Normandy, rope in hand, nostrils flaring. Biscuit, sensing the threat, waited just long enough to lull her into confidence, and then bolted straight under her legs. Karen spun, tripped, and landed face first in a pile of what I can only hope was mostly dirt. For a moment, the world went silent. Then, laughter. Real, belly-deep laughter from people who had once been too scared to even roll their eyes when Karen spoke at HOA meetings. Something shifted that day. You could feel it in the air. Pride cracking, walls falling, being messy, but real. Community. Not the HOA kind written in bylaws and fine print. The kind you built with sweat, mistakes, and a goat named Biscuit. And if you thought the Ranch Olympics were wild, wait till you hear what we discovered next, buried deep in the old barn records. In Part 6, Buried Papers, Broken Trust, the real reason Karen fought so hard. Dusty files and broken dreams, the land that never really left. You ever find something that changes the way you see a person forever? Because tucked away behind a pile of broken tack and abandoned chicken feeders in the old barn loft, we found Karen's real secret. It was Gloria who spotted it first. A battered filing box half covered in mouse droppings and hope long since abandoned. Inside, land deeds, yellowed newspaper clippings, handwritten letters tied with twine so brittle it crumbled when we touched it. At first, I thought it was just more of my grandfather's records. But then Gloria held up a document with Karen Butterfield's name printed across the top, in swooping cursive, before she learned to hide behind block letters and bylaws. Turns out, once upon a time, this land, this very patch of earth she now treated like a battleground, had belonged to her family. Her real family. Not the HOA goons she clung to now like armor. Her blood, her sweat, her history. The Butterfield Ranch, Ask. 1947. A working cattle operation that ran strong for almost 40 years, until a messy foreclosure during the recession broke it apart piece by piece. The city gobbled it up, parceled it off. Karen's family fought, lost, and left. She must have been a teenager then, old enough to remember the way the grass smells after rain. Old enough to know what it feels like when something you love gets bulldozed and paved over with someone else's idea of progress. Gloria looked at me across the mess of papers, her expression soft. Maybe this place isn't just a fight to her, she said quietly. Maybe it's a wound she's been trying to stitch shut with control. I didn't say anything. Not at first. Because part of me didn't want to feel sorry for her. Not after everything. But, standing there in the fading light, the dust swirling around us like a memory you couldn't quite grab, I realized something. Karen hadn't come here to destroy. Not really. She'd come to reclaim. She just didn't know how to ask for it without trying to conquer it. Maybe deep down, she didn't believe she deserved it anymore. And maybe, just maybe, that's why the ranch broke her down before it started building her back up. And speaking of breaking down and building back up, wait till you see what happened when Karen tried to fix her mistakes the only way she knew how, by throwing the wildest barn party this county's ever seen. Coming up next, in Part 7, From Battlefields to Barn Dances, the day the ranch danced again. The last harvest, when enemies become reluctant family. If you had told me 3 years ago that I'd be standing shoulder to shoulder with Karen Butterfield under a blood-orange sunset, tossing hay bales onto the back of an old Ford, I would have laughed so hard I'd have dropped my beer. But there we were, the final harvest of the season. The last haul before winter tucked the ranch under its heavy gray blanket. Randy was swearing under his breath about a splinter the size of a pencil stuck in his thumb. Kendra was trying to lasso a particularly stubborn goat, who decided today was a good day for rebellion. And Karen? Well, Karen was working, not managing, not clipboard wielding. Her hands were blistered. Her boots were real, worn down at the heel like she actually earned the dirt caked into them. Her hair was tucked under a sun-bleached ball cap that looked suspiciously borrowed from Gloria's retired rodeo queens collection. She didn't complain, didn't grandstand, just grabbed a bale, grunted, and heaved it up onto the truck bed next to mine. "That's the last of it," she said, brushing straw off her jeans. I looked around, at the neatly stacked bales, the quietly grazing cattle, the sunset slanting long and golden across the fields, and for the first time in years, the ranch felt complete. Not untouched, not perfect, but alive in a way that only happens when the land chooses you back. We leaned against the truck, sweaty, tired, but somehow at peace. "Not bad for a bunch of suburban castaways," I muttered. Karen snorted. Randy gave a mock salute. Kendra, still tangled in goat lead ropes, just waved from the dirt. For a long minute, nobody said anything. We just stood there breathing in the cool, sweet air. I thought about all the fights, all the loss, all the days I wanted to tear this whole mess down and build a moat filled with snapping turtles just to keep Karen out. And somehow, here we were. Not friends, not quite enemies anymore either. Something different. Family maybe. The reluctant, bickering, drive each other crazy kind. The kind you don't choose but end up bleeding and sweating beside anyway. Until one day you realize you wouldn't trade them for anything. Karen turned to me, wiping her hands on her jeans. "You know," she said, almost smiling, "this place, it gets under your skin." I chuckled. "Yeah, that's called tetanus. You should get a booster." She laughed, a real, unguarded laugh that made even the goats stop and look. And right then, I knew. The ranch wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to every scraped up, broken down, stubborn soul who'd been forged in its dust. And that's why what happened next, when Karen handed me something unexpected, something that would change everything for the ranch forever, hit harder than any punch she'd ever thrown. Stick around for the final part. 8. Saddle up for second chances. A rancher's last laugh. Beyond fences and grudges. The ranch reborn. Karen didn't say a word when she handed me that envelope. No grand speech. No condescending wink. Just a simple nod, like two soldiers calling a truce after a war neither one could really explain anymore. I opened it right there, under the bruised purple sunset, dust curling around our boots. Inside was a deed. My son over clear and clear. Her house. Her tiny backyard slice of my ranch, the one she fought so hard to control, now officially back in the hands of the land it came from. And attached was a note, just 4 words scrawled in messy, almost shaky handwriting. "For the bulls. For you." I didn't know what to say. Hell, I didn't even know what to feel. It wasn't victory. It wasn't gloating. It was something heavier and better. Like when rain finally falls on a field cracked dry from too many years of hoping. I folded the paper carefully, tucked it into my back pocket, and looked up at Karen. She was already walking away, back toward Randy and Kendra, who were trying and failing to tie down a tarp over the last hay bale. She didn't look back. Maybe she knew if she did, neither of us would be able to pretend this was just business anymore. Weeks passed. The winter settled over the ranch, crisp and silent. The field slept under a thick quilt of frost. The cows huddled close in the barns, their breath fogging up the cold morning air. And every morning I'd pass the fence line where Karen's backyard used to start and smile a little. No more invisible borders. No more tug-of-wars over land that never really belonged to anyone but the earth itself. We didn't erase the past. You can't, not really. You can't unbreak a horn or unspill a grudge. But we did build something better over it, like laying new seed into scarred soil and trusting it to grow anyway. The town changed, too. People talked less about lawsuits and more about potlucks. The old ranch road that once carried angry trucks and trespassers now saw kids biking down it with fishing poles slung across their backs. In every fall, the ranch held the hoedown hoe, part rodeo, part barbecue, all heart, with Karen, now lovingly dubbed Queen of the Cattle Queens, organizing the pie-eating contests, and Kendra running a booth that sold more honey than sense. Even Randy finally got his mobile feed truck business off the ground. You can't drive a mile without seeing a bumper sticker that says, "Moo Crew, we deliver," and "Don't get electrocuted anymore." And Gloria stayed. Not because she had to, and not because anyone made her. but because sometimes, just sometimes, you fight through enough storms and enough stubbornness that you realize the best place to be is right beside the people who helped you weather it. One evening, as the sun dipped low and turned the fields to fire, Gloria and I stood by the new fence. Not a barrier, just a lie, a promise that what's worth keeping is worth respecting. I looked at her, then out over the land, and realized something. It wasn't just a ranch anymore. It was proof that people could change, that broken things could be rebuilt, that the past could be honored without being chained to it, and that even a bull without his horns still knew exactly who he was: proud, stubborn, unstoppable. That wilty. So, if you're ever driving through Granger County and you see a crooked hand-painted sign that says, "Welcome to Redfield Ranch, home of second chances and the world's angriest goat," you'll know you found the place. A place where grudges are left at the gate, where respect grows as stubbornly as wild grass, and where a bull, a ranch, and a ragtag family of former enemies prove that sometimes the best fences aren't the ones that keep people out. They're the ones strong enough to invite them in. If this story made you laugh, tear up, or just feel a little more hopeful, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and share it with someone who believes second chances are worth fighting for. And hey, if you've ever wrangled your own Karen or rebuilt something worth keeping, tell me your story down in the comments. I'd love to hear it.